In this video series, we're going to look at how to use the Flexbox CSS layout system. And I've gone ahead and I've written a little bit of HTML here. So I've got a section and there's 3 divs inside it. I've also written just a touch of CSS basically to give them background colors so we can see them. And what the Flexbox system allows us to do is it allows us to align elements and distribute them in one dimension. So in this case, we're going to get each of these 3 divs beside each other on the same line. Now Flexbox works slightly differently from a lot of the CSS you might be used to, because we don't target these divs directly to get them onto the same line. Instead, we target their parent element. And we target that element and turn it into what's called a flex container. And by turning it into a flex container, all of the direct children, so the divs in this case, would be affected. They would become Flexbox items. So it wouldn't affect the H1s or H2s. It would just affect the divs, because they're direct descendants of the section. So if I wanted to get these 3 divs here beside each other on one line, I can go into my CSS and I'll just go down to the bottom here and I'm going to target section and I'm going to write display flex like that. So I wrote display flex, I'll go back and refresh, and you can see they're now all on the same line. So they're distributed horizontally. Now you can see they've become all mashed together like this, and we can kind of control how they're viewed. So we can space them out and stuff like that. So one example would be I could go justify content, space between, like this, and they would stretch out to fill the whole space available, and it would automatically calculate the amount of space between each of these items to make it equal. There's a slightly different one. There's space around, which changes it so that the edges are not touched. So the space on each side of the flex item is equal. So the space over here and the space here and the space here is all equal. So those are different ways we can distribute the elements. There's one more for justify content, and that's called center, which will move them to the center, and that's pretty simple. So we've got these items distributed on the same line. You'll notice here that the center one is actually taller than the outside ones, and by default Flexbox is stretching the divs to make them equal height. We could change that. Well, we can adjust that a little bit. So there's another property we can look at called align items. So where justify content works this dimension in the order that we're arranging the items, align items works in the opposite dimension. And so we could align these, for instance, into the center like this. And you can see now it's not stretching them anymore. It's actually choosing to align them to the center of their boxes. There's other options too, like flex start. It will align them to essentially the top because we're using the horizontal arrangement. Or there's flex end like this. And then the one that we saw just a second ago, the default one, is align items stretch. So that's what the default is. And you can see that they're stretching to be the same height. Now, the other thing, if we were trying to make these into 3 equal columns, right now they're kind of shrinking down to be just the size that they need to be, to the minimum size of their content. So very simply, we could add a width to them, but in this case, the width acts directly on the children, so we'd have to target the divs like this and go width 33.333%. Oop, there's a percent, and go back to, and now you can see they're distributing amongst, or like they're equal widths. We could also apply some margins on them or padding if we wanted some space around them. So let's go padding, just go 1em like this. And now you can see, oh, sorry, I meant to do margin. So now we have space around each of them because we're creating margins around each of the flex items. So we can use the width and justify content and align items to kind of distribute things horizontally. And that's the reason that we most often use it is horizontal distribution, but we can also do vertical distribution. And in the next videos, we'll look at how to do vertical distribution.